Welcome to the Critical Conversation in DEI. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Allen Sutton from WSU, who's shown a really remarkable affinity for the work we do in conservation districts. And as WACD, we're very pleased to actually sponsor part of the cost of bringing Dr. Sutton to you. And with that, the entire state of yours.
Thank you, Tom. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I know this may be a little uncomfortable, but can some of y'all? You don't have to get beside each other if you don't want to, just a little bit. I don't have a big affinity for microphones. I don't have a clicker, so I'm gonna have to stay here, so I don't want this side of the room to think I'm kind of ignoring you, but I'll try to move around as much as I can. But first of all, thank you all for inviting. Glad to be here. And so as Tom talked about, we will be talking about a critical conversation in DEI. And so I'll jump right in so that we can make sure we have enough time to kind of go through things. So I'll start out with this picture here, which is saying he who controls language controls culture. And so the reason I'm starting out with that is because everything that DEI is about is kind of shaped and formed through language, through how we speak or how we term or how we label certain terms. And so as we're probably seeing today in any kind of news or social media, you can kind of see there are certain terms that are certain things for certain people. And there are certain terms that are absolutely not those things. And they're arguing back and forth about who's right about what the meaning is. And so in order for us to kind of dig a little bit deeper into DEI and why it's important, we have to get past those terms. So we have to set a base of language. And so what I want to do today is to give you all a little assignment real quick. So just there or to the person next to you, if you don't have someone next to you, you can do it with yourself. We're going to do a terminology exercise. And so what the terminology exercise is going to be is I want you to write down or think about the first words or terms that come to mind when you see these words or the word that pops up on the screen. So you can share it with your partner or you can keep it to yourself, or you can write it down if you're a writer. So just honestly, what these words mean to you or what word or what terms pop into your head when you see them. So the first one is diversity. I'll give you a minute to kind of think. Talk about it with the person next to you. Whether it's positive or negative. And again, as we're getting started, I just kind of want to reiterate to everybody what's said in here, let's let it stay in here. The only way we can grow and learn is if we allow each other to make mistakes. So talk about it, be honest, and we can grow from there. Okay, we have diversity. I'll give you some time. Everybody's talking to this. Our next one is respect. You see the term respect, what do you think about? What is the first thing or the second things or terms, negative or positive, that pops into your mind? Respect. I promise there's a method to my madness. It'll make sense momentarily. Welcome, come on in. Tell me. Okay. Next turn. Inclusion. Inclusion. Oh, leave it up there. I'll leave it up there. I'm gonna give you time. Oh, okay. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
I may have to close out the. Yeah. I think I gave. I have it. Last year. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
You're okay. Okay, we're up to inclusion. Everybody kind of have something going there? Okay, good. The next one is equity. Equity. Positive or negative? Thoughts, first words. You're wondering what we're doing?
They're doing the same.
I know we're moving fast, but we have to. Whoa. I heard someone say, uh-oh. What comes to mind when you hear the word whoa?
Conscientious awareness.
Whoa.
Conscientious awareness.
And we'll move it faster. The final two are empathy and value. So woke, empathy, and value. What do you think about when you hear all of those terms? So I give you all a minute or 2 minutes to kind of discuss, and then we'll jump right in.
Values. Really on.
I mean, I think value sometimes in the negative context of like what somebody from that, you know, I like. I think a lot of people think of value. So like, what can I get out of you, even if it's just from like a professional relationship?
Another minute.
Empathy is interesting though, because everybody's so different at sympathy. Especially like when you have like conversations of this, oh, I sympathize with you, but I have sympathy for you, those are different things. So I can empathize with you. It's really nice.
Okay, so we're gonna come back. I know some of you may be still discussing, but that's okay, that's good. So the reason I had you all do this exercise is because language, as I said, is foundational. And everything we do, certain terms mean certain things. And unfortunately, the academic and some of us, consultants did people a disjustice. And what I mean by that is we made diversity, equity, and inclusion fit everybody. And that our definitions were malleable, where you could take it to your organization and make it fit what your organization needs. Bad actors have taken that and said, there's no clear definition for this. And so I can make my own. So where it's like critical race theory, they can just pile anything on there that they want because there's no set definition. So if I ask anybody in here to define diversity, I probably get 12, 13, 20 different answers. Same thing with all of these different terms. And so what I did for this exercise is I went to the Oxford Dictionary and pulled up all of these terms and their definitions. Now, I'm not going to read them, but the reason I did that is because a lot of people, well, let me back up a little bit. When you saw the word respect pop up on the screen, what were your thoughts? Someone just tell me. Just feel free to speak out. What was the thing that came to your mind first? Aretha Franklin. Aretha Franklin. That's a good one. Anybody else?
Courtesy in context.
Courtesy in context. Anybody had a negative definition for respect?
they want to tell you, respect your elders.
Right.
Kind of sometimes can be turned into like punishments that, you know, where the
Okay.
actual culture of respect.
I can see that. So most of your definitions or your immediate context around the word respect was primarily positive, right? Okay. What about diversity? I mean, I know some of you all are probably advocates for diversity, so you probably didn't think negatively, but I'm pretty sure it's something popped into your head that someone has said or told you about diversity that is negative. But you probably didn't have that same reaction for the word respect, correct? Okay. Same thing with woke. If I say woke, you're gonna get 50 different definitions, none of them probably which are true or what the actual definition is, but it has a very negative connotation for some people. It has a very positive connotation for some people. Same thing with empathy. The reason I outline this is because if you boil down diversity, equity, and inclusion to its base form, you're talking about respecting, valuing, and showing empathy to your fellow man and woman. It's all it is. But we have politicized it to the point where people have gotten into their corners and said, this is what diversity is. I don't like that. But if you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, these definitions, if you look at the definition of diversity, it's a range of many people or things that are very different from each other. That's not very controversial. Inclusion is the act or state of including or being included within a group or structure. Not very controversial. Woke, the general term woke and where it came from, mid-1900s, African-American community is being informed and educated and conscious of social injustice and racial inequity. Most of the laws being passed that are anti-woke have nothing to do with that at all. And the reason I point that out is because many people will tell you that they love talking about respect and value and empathy, and that's a same topic, and we can talk about that all day, but DEI is basically those things without the politics. And so that's why I start with this, is because it's foundational in everything we do. And an example I have here is equality versus equity. So this is a big debate too. And so anybody looking at this picture, can you tell me what you see? Just kind of explain it, the top part. Okay.
But everyone gets the same bicycle.
Right. The principle of equality is that everybody, regardless of who they are and where they are or where they come from, gets the same thing, which seems like a fair deal, right? You know, if you tell somebody, hey, everybody's gonna get the same thing, everybody's gonna be treated the same, you're like, I can get behind that. But if you look at the picture, if we gave everybody a bike of the same size, everybody can't partake in riding the bike. Because even though there's equality in what they receive, everybody can't participate because everybody don't fit what was given. The young lady in the wheelchair can't ride a bike, obviously, because she doesn't have the use of her legs. The male that's kind of scrunched over is scrunched over because the bike is too small for her. Our mother, perfect, fits her great. She's gonna ride and have a good time, while the little boy can't reach the pedals, too small. So while we say equality and people are like, well, I can get behind that, it leaves people out. And so that's why people we call equity when we talk about equity. And that has become a dirty word here recently for some reason or another. But equity is giving everyone what they need from the level that they come from whatever they need or wherever they, whatever they need, you give them that specific item. And so people see that as kind of unfair sometimes, because maybe the little girl who's in a wheelchair, her bike, maybe it costs more than the little boy's bike, because you have to get a specialized bike. However, if you want everybody to participate in the bike ride, you have to get a bike that she can use. Same thing with the father. Now he's comfortably able to sit up and ride the bike on the mountain trail or wherever they're going. Same thing with the little boy. He now has a bike where he can reach the pedals and go where he needs to go. Language paints everything. And so even though equality is not a negative thing, it's not a complete thing. And so that's why I like to talk about language and make sure people understand that, because people use language to manipulate or to kind of throw people off. Like, hey, we want to help people. We're all for equality, but equality doesn't help everyone. And so that's why I wanted to point that one out. Now, this one is a little, y'all may be a little familiar with this. How many of you are familiar with grafting? Show of hands. Anybody can tell me what that means?
And taking something, combining it with another thing, takes roots from that one other thing.
Right, okay, good. So, in grafting or in gardening, typically what happens is when someone wants to graft something, they have a fruit or a plant or something that is very productive, it's growing, it's giving away fruit, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, but it's susceptible to disease or something that could kill it or take away profits from whatever you're trying to do. So scientists came up with grafting, where they would then take the top part of a plant, graft it to the bottom part of a plant that may be immune to whatever disease or whatever issue that may be happening that could be hurting the other plant, so that that plant could then take on the characteristics of the rootstock, which is immune. The reason I'm talking about grafting and immunity and all of that stuff is very simple. When we talk about racism in this country, a lot of people get upset when we say there's systemic racism. And racism permeates everything, but it's very true. And the reason it's true is because our country was built on racism and all kinds of isms and phobias. And so if the root of the country is indeed built on these things, everything that comes out of it will be affected by those roots, which is why you can graft on civil rights and the Civil Rights Act, or you can graft on laws and change things, but it doesn't change the undercurrent of what's affecting everyone in the country. So the reason we're talking about grafting here is that we try to graft things on to the tree of our country several times. And it always seems to backfire, or it gets good for a while and then it goes back. And that's because our roots are really dug into isms and phobias. And that's not pointing fingers at anybody. It's just the way it was. That's how it was. How do we get out of that? And so, let me look. I want to make sure I don't get past that. If an organization or office or institution, and yes, a country is built on principles such as isms and phobias, then obviously, even though history and data shows us that we have racist tendencies, we have bad hiring, we have gatekeepers, we have all of these things, people don't want to say that we have a racist country because they feel like we're pointing the finger at individual people. So when I say white privilege, a lot of you will tense up really quickly because you're going to think I'm talking about you, but it's not about you. It's about a system, systems of oppression, systems of racism, not what you're doing. Unless you're intentionally feeding into that, then that would play to you. When I talk about white privilege, I always tell people to use that privilege for your advantage. No one, white, black, Hispanic, Latino, anybody would say, I have a privilege and I'm not going to use it. If you're given an advantage in any way, human nature is to use that advantage. What we're talking about with white privilege is saying, you have an advantage, use it to help others. Not to not use it to bring others to where you are. So when we're talking about grafting, we're saying we want you, the people who have power to be able to change things, to actively start pulling up those roots that are built in isms and phobias and figure out how you can help others. So it's not about blaming, it's not about saying it's because of you, you did this. If you look at our history, which a lot of people don't want to talk, you know, they don't want you to talk about those things. Broken treaties, Trail of Tears, genocide, slavery, Jim Crow, all of those things are in the roots of our country, whether we like them or not. We can ignore it, we can act like it didn't happen, but it's there. Even in our religion. Picture at the bottom, you have a nice gathering of Ku Klux Klan members. in a church under the banner Jesus Saves. Because we were built on that principle. And it's not just people of color. Irish need not apply. Jews need, are not welcome. So what we're saying is if this is our roots, these are our roots, we have to figure out how to pull those roots up and change the way we're doing things. So if we grafted that little plant earlier with all those ideas, and now this is how that plant looks. Big tree. Very hard to pull up roots of a tree like that. It takes more than just a speaker like myself, or even an organization like you. It takes people to really get behind the message. What we have is in our country, we'll have an incident, everybody gets behind the message, everybody kind of peters out, we go back to status quo, something happens, we start over again. So unless we have a consistent thing, all of that old stuff I just showed you, with the Ku Klux Klan, all that was in the past. And I know everybody goes, oh, that's in the past. That doesn't affect us now. These pictures were in the last decade. And the picture there on the right with the swastikas, that was 2 days ago in front of Disney World. So the roots are what's causing our issue. Erasing DEI from college campuses. Can't use funds to teach that. We don't want you to talk about those things. Anti-transgender laws, banning books, can't say gay. Those are all nice ways to do what was done in the past, which is ban people. These people aren't allowed. But now we can codify it in laws and seem like we're doing it very legit like. And that's why the roots are the issue, not people. So we have to figure out as people how to pull up those roots. And so I started this with a quote that says, he who controls language controls culture. And this is an old African proverb here. And it says, until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. And the reason I put that on there is because the people who control language, politics, religion, all those different things want the status quo to remain, which is why you see this big push for anti-DEI. In 2020, or when the whole George Floyd thing happened, and all of the marches and all the things that were going on, what was unique about those marches that didn't happen in years past? Can anybody tell me?
They were more diverse. There were white people were participating.
Exactly. In those marches, there were more white people marching for what happened in George Floyd than there were people of color. Statistics will tell you that, look it up. And that is why 2 years later, you're now seeing people talking about indoctrination in college. We have to get rid of DEI stuff because now students are learning about history. And our new generation, we may have all kinds of complaints about them, but one thing they are is they are aware of what's going on. And so they saw this stuff, it's wrong, so I'm gonna march against that. The only way they can stop that type of education, problem solving, skill development is to get it out of colleges, which is what they're doing, which is why you now see this anti-DEI push. Oh, we don't need that, that's unnecessary, it's reverse racism. All of these different things are happening as a backlash to what they saw happening in 2020, 2021. So when I say 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, that's what I mean. They see how people start progressing, and then they figure out a way to dismantle. The word woke, people have been using that for decades, but it became a convenient word to pile on other things that certain people didn't like. So now if you have a DEI person in your office, you're woke. Even Chick-fil-A is being accused of being woke. And that's God's chicken. I mean, that's what they call it. They call it. That's what they say. They are upset. They're talking about boycotting that. They're going to boycott Budweiser, and they're boycotting all of these things now as a way to strip away some of the progress that has been made. And so until the lion learns to write the story, which are the people, not just people of color, but people who are actively trying to dismantle the system, until we start having some impact, they will always glorify the people who are saying that they're doing what's right. So right now, the whole thing is parental choice. We're gonna ban these books because we want to give a parent a choice. And if anybody here is a parent and someone tells you, hey, we want to give you a choice of what your students, your kids are learning at school, you're not gonna see that as a negative thing. That sounds reasonable, right? But that's exactly what they do. They hide policies that strip away rights behind reasonable definitions. And so we have to figure out how to get past that. And so people, like I talked about earlier, talking about white privilege and all of those things, we have to learn to let go of our discomfort around these conversations. Until you stop being uncomfortable around them, the people who are comfortable pushing these policies that are stripping away, minoritizing people and marginalizing people, they're going to continue to win. But I have to say, some of that is on people like us as well. Because when people do mess up, some people tend to do more than slap hands. They want to be angry, oh, you messed up. And so some people would rather be silent, even though they agree, than to get in trouble themselves. So it's like, I don't want to get in trouble, I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'm just going to be quiet. And so I have this quote up here. Pretty sure all of you in here are familiar with Star Wars. And so it says, train yourself to let go of everything you're afraid to lose. DEI training to most people is them losing something. They see that kind of thing rights as pie. If I give this group this, that's going to take something away from me. And that's not necessarily the case, because it's not pie. We can treat everybody the same and be equitable without people being left out. And so the way to do that is, I got 5 different ways that I'm going to help you all kind of shift through how you can be more impactful in DEI work. And you don't even have to call it DEI work. I tell people all the time, most of the work you're doing with people, outreach, and communities is DEI work. You're just not calling it that. When you're setting office standards, you're doing all of those things, that's DEI work. You're teaching your staff how to respect one another, how to value one another. And so we have to get past this as a DEI checklist and figure out how we can engraft it or graft it to things that we're doing every day. And so the first thing there is understanding the beautiful lie. Has anybody ever heard that term? Show of hands, anybody heard that term? Okay, now the beautiful lie, and I'm gonna read it out for you, is that there's only one way that you can achieve the dream of equity and true justice, and that we will win, quote, if we fight the enemy harder, resist their oppression with more vigor, confront injustice with more strength. And while these actions are important, we need to do that. We have to shift to those deeper values that we talked about a little bit earlier around respect and empathy. Even though they're the same thing, we have to start using that language. And what I mean by that is, when we're talking about the beautiful lie, we have to dismantle kind of the belief around how we discuss these issues. And what that means is we always put one another in categories of us versus them. Many of you, when you came in, you immediately went to someone that you knew, worked with, or you're friends with. Because we're naturally, as humans, drawn to familiarity, to comfort. And so you walk to or you work with people, you hang with people that you're comfortable with. And so kind of the systems and how the systems have been built in our country, they prey on that. They realize that's how we operate. If we can threaten this group with that group, then that group will dislike this group. If we can keep those groups from combining, we can keep this in place. And so what they do is they fuel us into those us versus them groups, determining people as enemies. So if anybody, probably old as me, probably remember even in the mid-90s, politics. the one politician that everybody really liked, regardless of, political party, was John McCain. Why do people like John McCain? Anybody?
I didn't like him, but.
Well, everybody don't, but I would say, him being a Republican, you would have a lot more Democrats that liked him. And you had a lot of Republicans that liked him. Why was that?
Yeah, personal standards.
Anybody else?
You vote.
I found him honorable. He was as good as his word, didn't, say things that he didn't really do.
Except for his vice president.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't really do that, but.
He advocated for other people, including his enemy, Barack Obama. I mean, there was that one function where somebody said, I don't like him because of this. He's like, no, no, no. He's a perfectly respectful person and we're going to treat him that way.
He had a civil nature.
Yeah.
in all of his interactions that was very evident, although some of his policy stuff was.
All of you are correct. He understood there was a gray area, which is something we do not have anymore. Everything can't be this, everything can't be that. Can we meet in the middle? He was a facilitator. Let's figure out how we can all get on the same page. Most people nowadays, you don't do that because we build our bubbles in social media with people who are like us, who think like us, who vote like us, who do all the things that we like. And so we're in this echo chamber of people telling us that this is the right thing to do. And that's on the left and the right. This is the right thing to do, not that. And so now, when you hear politicians running for office, they're trying to outrun the other person to the edges. No one is coming to the middle. Everybody wants to out conservative someone else or out liberal the other person. The reason I bring that up is because since we no longer have a middle, it's hard for people to understand how to connect across differences. We make people enemies now. Like if you listen to the rhetoric now, the stuff they're saying today about a person that they're running against would have never flown in the 90s. Like they're calling people devil worshipers and they're drinking, alien blood, all this kind of stuff that you're hearing now that most people would have been like, this is ridiculous. We would never vote this person. But now those are the people who are leading parties. And that's what people hear. They hear the blatant disrespect. They hear the blatant, this is your enemy. Like, yes, they're American citizens, but that's an enemy. You shouldn't like them. You shouldn't work with them. You shouldn't do anything with this person because what they are is antithetical to who we are. And all of that trickles down into your kids. It trickles down into our offices. It trickles down into everything we do. And that's why you hear people no longer being able to come to consensus or middle ground. The beautiful lie fuels that. It asks one group to dehumanize another group because they're being dehumanized. So I'm gonna out dehumanize you. So you're gonna say this, I'm gonna do it a step further. And then you're gonna say this, and I'm gonna go a step further. So now people are enemies. This is communist. This person doesn't even deserve to be in our country simply because you didn't vote for a bill or you have a certain belief. And so the beautiful lie tells us that we have to dehumanize others, even those we disagree with, in order to win equity and true justice. We have to interrupt that cycle from the left, right, and the center. If we don't, we're going to continue the same cycle that we've always done. And so we have to disrupt the beautiful lie, which means that be culturally humble. That means you approach every conversation that you have with someone as if you can learn something from them. Or you can be their friend. A lot of people, you kind of peg people immediately. Maybe you walked into their office and they have a poster or a sign or something, and it may be something that you dislike. And if it is, you immediately put that person in the them category. And so we have to interrupt that. So interrupting the beautiful lie is the first one. The next one is self-awareness. This is key for everybody. If you want to do DEI work, you have to be self-aware. And what I mean by self-aware, that means knowing who you are, what your values are, what your triggers are, what you believe, what you don't believe. We have a lot of self-esteem in this country. We have a lot of self-aggrandizing in this country. We have very little self-awareness. Case in point, COVID. You had doctors with decades of experience saying this, and you had a guy with a YouTube channel saying that. You had politicians boosting the guy on the YouTube channel because it fit their political agenda. We have to develop self-awareness because self-awareness is what's driving this lack of a middle. We feel like if someone disagrees with us, then we have no use for them. Or if you vote differently than me, then we can't be connected in any way because you're a threat to what I believe. And that means that you really don't have strong values if my values threaten yours. Self-assessment allows you to dig deep and figure out what your values are and be okay with it. My pronouns are he, him, his. Did anybody's heart stop when I said that? Did you stop being a Christian? Did you lose faith? Did it hurt in any way, shape, form, or fashion? That's what I'm talking about. Nowadays, even using a pronoun makes people angry. They want to outlaw. I want to ban it. I don't like what this book says, so we need to ban it. I don't like what this politician is doing, so we need to cancel him and ban him too, or her. And that is the problem. We are no longer confident in our own values and beliefs. And so what we try to do is silence others' values and beliefs. Just look around the country, you'll see it. They're banning books. 10 years ago, if I told you that we will be banning books in this country, you would have looked at me like I was crazy. There's no way we're gonna ban books. That's anti-American. But now it's as American as apple pie. Like this book is this. And I always give the example. We're gonna ban books. People are banning books because they say it's let's see, there's violence in the book. They're talking about rape. They have sex, they have all of these things, and we're exposing our children to them. Those same people will tell you that we need to teach the Bible in school. And anybody who's read the Bible knows that there is rape, slavery, sex, murders, all kinds of things. And I say that as a person who's a Christian and who goes to church every Sunday. I believe that. But what I'm saying is when we start banning things because of certain terms and certain things, we're on a slippery slope. And that's what's happening now. Because we lack self-awareness, we no longer have convictions of our beliefs. Like you talked about John McCain. His party used to get pissed off at him all the time. Sorry about that. The party used to get angry with him all the time because he would make deals with people, even if it made his party mad, because he felt like that was best for the whole country. We no longer have people that do that. If I don't like what you're doing, I'm gonna pass laws to get rid of that. Ban that, make it hard for people to do that. I don't agree with LGBT issues. So I'm gonna pass bills to make it hard to even live in certain states. But that's not the problem. The problem is you have a problem with those things. And so you feel like you have to ban or shut out other people who don't believe or act the way you act. And that's a problem. So if you want to start doing this work on a deeper level, you have to be okay with what triggers you. Everybody in this room, regardless of your color, has bias. Everybody, including myself. I know some of you probably haven't heard that. Some of you like, oh, I thought only white people got it. That's not true. Bias is what we see every day. Television gives us bias every day. My wife, she loves cop shows. Watches Rescue, whatever, 911, CIS, NCIS, all those different shows. And on all those shows, the cops are the heroes. They're saving cats. They're doing all the things they're supposed to be doing by the book. And so your brain takes that information in and stores it over here. It takes that information in and stores it over here. Our brain is the most powerful thing on earth, but it's also the most lazy. And it's lazy because it wants us to think fast for fight or flight. So it teaches us and stores things in our brains that tells us certain things so that we can react at a moment's notice when we have to. So when you walk outside and you see maybe a black guy with a hoodie on, you're gonna reflect, your brain is gonna send you to the memories or thoughts that you've had of that. And if that means this person is a criminal, that's what you're automatically gonna think. That does not make you bad. That makes you human. It's how you react after that thought that helps you either get better or further dig yourself into that bias. And I talk about the cop shows for a reason. Anytime someone sees a police sanctioned or police shooting on TV, the first question they ask, it could be a person of any color. They don't ask why the police officer shot. They ask, what did that person do to deserve the police officer shooting them? And that's a big difference. You know, people are like, well, what's the difference? The difference is the police officer gets the benefit of the doubt because of what you have seen on news, what you've read, what you've been taught. And that's true. Most police officers, 98, 99% of them are good, do what they're supposed to do. But it's the frame of thinking that makes things like police shootings. And people like, well, he should have just did this. Instead of saying, even if he was guilty, he still deserved a trial. He didn't deserve to be shot unless you were being shot at. That's the logic we skip to. Because we have to maintain what our brain has told us. And that's what bias is. That's all bias is. And so the only way you can break through that bias is to interrupt it. And I always tell people when you leave here today, instead of using your right hand, if you're right-handed, use your left hand to open the doors for the rest of the day and see how it goes. You forget. And you're constantly reaching with that because we run on autopilot. Most of our interactions throughout the day are on autopilot. We do it without thinking, without even worrying about why we're doing it, because that's what we always do and that's what our brain tells us. So in order to interrupt bias, when it happens, you have to immediately check that. That doesn't mean he's a criminal. That doesn't mean this. You'll never get rid of it, but it helps you to start chipping away at it. We will never get rid of bias. And so I say that under the self-awareness banner because until we can move past that point where we're comfortable in our skin and our values and what we believe, and we're okay with someone who believes the exact opposite, we'll never be able to pull those roots up. The next one is seeking common ground. That's the big one. I already talked about us versus them, and that's something we do, and that's ingrained too. If you believe in cavemen and all that stuff, which most of us do, 300,000 years ago, if you were different, you were killed. You either did everything like the herd, or you were cast out of the herd, or you were killed. So you were either us, or you were them. And that has been encoded in all of our DNA. We still do that today. Like I said, if you came in, you immediately look for someone you knew to sit by, to kind of, to have a conversation with, be comfortable with, and you are comfortable having these conversations with them, talking about diversity, things that could be uncomfortable because you know them. All of us seek comfort, but that comfort also creates the tensions that we have. Because you only grow in active discomfort. People don't really tell you that, but the people that grow the most and do the best are not in comfort. they're struggling. They're trying to figure out how to be better or how to do better. And so if you want to actively seek common ground, I always tell people, you have to want to us all of them. Figure out a way that you can connect with other people. You don't have to agree with 90% of what a person does to be able to connect with them on a professional or even a personal level. Many people miss out on genuinely good relationships and friendships based off of a single interaction, a poster, or a comment taken out of context. How many of you have worked in an office space and a new person comes in and they say something, you're like, ooh, I can't. No, I can't do it. 2 years later, you walk in the break room and they're talking about binging a show that you're watching on Netflix that you absolutely love. And then all of a sudden you see them in a different light. You've wasted 2 years of what could have been a possibly good relationship because you made a snap judgment and put them in the them category. And that's what we all do. And so if you really, really genuinely want to start making connections and impact on DEI, you have to start reaching out to the people that you don't agree with. Now, I say that with this caveat. Some people can't be connected with. You have people who don't want to be a part of the group. You have people who don't want to connect with you because they are who they are. And that's fine. But 60 to 75% of people will give you the benefit of the doubt to listen. Figure out how you can make those connections with them. You had your question, you had a hand. Yeah, go ahead.
If you're gonna answer this, feel free to tell me you're gonna answer later,
Okay.
but when the beautiful design makes the stakes so high and makes everything black or white,
Mhm,
we're also somebody who has self-awareness
mhm,
and not all of the answers.
mhm,
And the way that you process your reactions or what the right way to do things is by asking questions.
mhm.
It can feel like, by simply asking a question, you are gonna paint yourself as a racist, a homophobe, a transphobe, or whatever. How do you, how do you do that?
You mean, how do you ask the right questions?
How
Okay.
how do you, like, make yourself better without thinking that, like, I know what my values are,
Mhm,
but there are times when I can ask questions that in hindsight, I really want to do. In hindsight, I'm like, okay, I probably should ask somebody
okay,
for guidance on that. But just asking for guidance on it can paint you in black or white.
gotcha. I will answer that.
Okay.
I'll skip ahead a slide. It is okay to make mistakes. That simply means you're trying. If a DEI person tells you that you're wrong for asking a question, you don't need that DEI person. The only way people can learn how to treat other people is to ask those questions. I do this for a living, been doing it for almost 18 years. I mispronounced someone last week. It happens. It happens because of how things change at such a fast rate. For the first 35 years of my life, the only pronouns I knew were the ones that they gave us in our English books. That's the only, and then it became, this is what you have to do. This is how you can be more inclusive. And so we have years, depending on how old we are, of socialization that have taught us certain things and how to react in certain ways. And as I told you earlier, our brain is lazy. So if you've learned something for 20, 30 years, or even 10 to 5, you're gonna have a big Rolodex over there that's gonna tell you the same things all the time. So even if you ask the wrong question, there are ways to frame things in order to be able to have the conversation you need to have. And so I skipped to the, it's okay to make mistakes because that means you're trying. To go back to this one. Oh, it went backwards, I pushed forward. Intent versus impact. And I'm not done with your question yet. When we ask those types of questions, or let me give you an illustration. Say you're walking in a grocery store, you have the buggy, and you're going down your favorite chip aisle and you're looking for whatever it is you're looking for. Someone is at the end of that row and they're kind of looking up at the aisle, they're looking up at the chips, not paying any attention. You kind of look down and glance, your son or daughter said something, and you clip that person's ankle with your buggy. Now that person's ankle hurts, right? More than likely if you hit it pretty good. Did you mean to hit that person? No. But that doesn't take away the fact that that person's ankle is hurting. Intent versus impact is where we get all of this tangled up stuff, and it's especially what you were talking about just a few minutes ago. Is people judge intent and impact when they shouldn't. So if I say something that is problematic to you, and you say, Alan, what you said hurt my feelings, I could answer that in one or two ways. I can either say, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Susan.
I'm sorry, Susan, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to mispronounce you. I didn't mean to do whatever I did. How can I make this better moving forward? If it's something like I mispronounced you, what's your preferred pronoun? If it's, hey, what you said was offensive, how is what I said offensive so I could not make that mistake again? It's about having that humility to ask what you did wrong, learn from it and grow. Most people will take option 2. Susan says, you hit my ankle, it hurts. Well, I didn't mean to do it. You're making this a big deal. It's really not a big deal. I'm sorry. You know, let's just move on. At that point, you're probably angry now because your ankle is hurting and you're like, dude, I was standing. You're like, you literally hit my ankle. And I'm angry because I feel like you're blaming me for something that I didn't intentionally do. This happens a lot when we're talking about DEI stuff. Like when I said privilege, again, people get antsy. There's a lot of privilege in this country. There's a right-handed privilege in this country. How many of you are left-handed? That's it. 15 to 20 years ago, teachers would have tied his hand behind his back to make him write with his right hand. The desk in some classrooms are only right-handed centered. Scissors, pencils, all these things are designed for right-handed people. There are tons of privileges in this country that people have that are white, that are Black, that are Hispanic, that are Latino, that are Asian, but we only focus on negative privilege and why that's negative. I say that to say this. Intent versus impact is often the reason why some of those conversations you were talking about turn out negative, because we always judge ourselves by our intentions and we judge others by their impact. So when you ask a question to learn something, if I want to be negative about it, then I can make this about you. You should know this, you're a problem. But if I want to learn something and I ask a question and you respond in the same way, then I'm gonna be upset because I feel like you're overly judging me. Because we always look at other people's problems with a magnifying glass and ours with a telescope. What we do wrong, it wasn't intentional. When you're asking those questions and you're trying to sort through those difficult conversations, it's always good to go in them with humility. What did I do wrong? How can I rectify it? And be genuine about it. I always tell people, you hurt a fellow human being. The best thing to do is to figure out how to make that right. It's not about DEI, it's not about political correctness. If you hurt somebody that you call a fellow human, the right thing to do is to figure out why and how I can fix it. And so that's why intent versus impact is big, because when someone tells you what you did was problematic, even if that's not what you intended, that's how it impacted them. Figure out how you can rectify that, fix it, and move forward. if people see you genuinely trying, most people, 99% of people will give you the benefit of the doubt. Like I said, I've been doing this for years and I mispronounce someone. The first thing I say, I'm sorry. How do you, what's the pronoun? What's your preferred pronoun again? Oh, it's this, okay. And I was intentionally trying to make sure that I said it moving forward. The only way we learn is to make those mistakes, be humble enough to say, I don't know, learn from it and continue to grow. And some people, again, back to that, we're very high on the self-importance scale, not so much on the self-assessment. We don't want to say we don't know because that bruises our ego. Well, I don't know. And so you immediately start launching into, well, I'm not racist. Well, yes, you are. And then when you get into that, you've lost that conversation. You've lost that person. So it's always about being humble when asking the question of how can I do better moving forward? Or how did I offend you? Or how can we work together to make sure this doesn't happen in our office again? So building those relationships. Now, we talked about it's okay to make mistakes. And so I have this quote here. And I like this quote because you hear a lot of people who are afraid to make mistakes saying, I just stay out of it because I don't want people to see me this way or that way. So even though I disagree with this law, I'm not gonna say anything. Or even though I disagree with how she was treated in that meeting, I'm not gonna say anything. I'll send her a direct message afterwards and let her know that it was unacceptable, but I'm not gonna stand up for her in front of the people that that situation happened with. And when you do that, this is what you do. If you're neutral in situations, I don't know why that is up there, I'm sorry, hold on. It said talking Krishna here, oops, I'm sorry. I have it over here. I wanna make sure I read it correctly. So give me just a second. If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you've chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. So if you know someone is intentionally hurting people in your office with their language, their behavior, and after meetings, you can go into that office and say, oh, that was so wrong. That shouldn't have happened. We need to talk to somebody about it. You're being neutral. You should have called it out when it happened. Most people do those things because they feel like they can do them. And if other people stand up and say, this is unacceptable, most of those people will be silent. But if they feel like they have the room, if you will, either most people are gonna remain silent or they agree with me, then most people will say whatever comes to their mind, no matter how hurtful, because they don't care. So be okay with making mistakes. Even if you're making them, I always tell people, my football coach used to say, if you're gonna make a mistake, go full out. So if you're gonna make a mistake and ask a question, find out all you need to find out about that. Don't be neutral about it. Figure out how you can dig deeper. And when someone holds the mirror to your face, don't blame them for the reflection. Blame the mirror, or better yet, blame yourself. Because you're only seeing what the mirror is showing. Many people like to blame the people that are doing this. I have a mirror up and you're looking and they don't like what they see, so they blame the person holding the mirror instead of the reflection. Figure out how you can move past those things. Yes, that's uncomfortable. Yes, it requires you to dig deep, but that's also how you make those genuine connections you need to make with your office, with your team, with your family, with the crazy uncle who always says racist things at Thanksgiving, those type of people. Some people can be reached, some can't, but you never know if you never say anything. Be okay with making mistakes. The next one is empathy, a lost art in our country nowadays. To ask for empathy now is to be called a snowflake. Oh, you want your safe spaces and all this. We're weak, it's a weak generation. And I always pull up this quote, and I'm gonna read it. I know it's long, but I'm gonna read it because it is very valid to DEI is very valid to the way our country is kind of headed in a lot of ways. And so this was from Barack Obama at a graduation ceremony at Northwestern in 2013. There's a lot of talk in this country about the federal deficit, but I think we should talk more about our empathy deficit. The ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, to see the world through those who are different from us, the child who's hungry, the laid off steel worker, the immigrant woman cleaning your dorm room. As you go on in life, cultivating this quality of empathy, if you go on in life, this quality of empathy will become harder, not easier. There's no community service requirement in the real world. No one is forcing you to care. You'll be free to live in neighborhoods with people who are exactly like yourself, send your kids to the same schools, and narrow all of your concerns to what's going on in your little circle. It comes with plenty of failure along the way. And this is always, oops, I'm sorry. It comes with plenty of failure along the way. So hold on. This is a PC and I'm struggling because I don't know. Along the way, the real test is not whether you avoid failure, because you won't. Again, you will make mistakes. It's whether you let it harden or shame you into inaction or xenophobia, or whether you learn and grow from it. So when someone challenges you for saying something wrong, empathy would ask you to put yourself in their place. Empathy would say, how can you make this relationship better? Most people skip that and go to, well, this is what I believe and I don't care what you think. So again, we have an over aggrandizement of who we are and what we believe in our opinions, not so much of others. So hold on, let me see if I can get this to, okay. Will the video play on there?
Should.
You should? Okay. I'm gonna play a very short video by Brene Brown for everyone. So give me just a second, I'm gonna try to move this out of the way.